Chapter 21. The hall fell into a complete silence. The temple guards looked bewildered. Dropping an entire room with one spell a necromancer was clearly not one to mess with. The temple was at fault here, and after reluctantly reaching an agreement with the mage for compensation, they were about to let the issue slide when this fellow just had to pick on the skull of the opposing party. Was he out of his mind? Young priest John started to open his mouth. Hands raised swiftly to cover it, a soft woo-woo sound escaped. Freckles on his face distorting. Almost protruding spearman Raymond gaped. Shield-bearer Valley widened his eyes, and Archer Tom, with his fiery red hair, seemed on the verge of combusting. "Garrett, snap out of it. This is a necromancer." "A necromancer? What are you fussing about the skull for? A perfectly fine child, raised by everyone. And how did a little enlightenment from the deity of nature turn you so peculiar?" Priest Donald lay face up, pinned down by a large cat, not daring to move. The cat on him, however, lifted its head, its golden eyes swirling as it glanced at Garrett. Then the golden skull, its tail swishing, brimming with curiosity. Pets being like this, naturally, piqued the interest of the necromancer. Taking a step forward, he lifted his gaze to the skull, then bent to inspect the pelvic bone left, right, couldn't figure it out, turned to Garrett and asked, "How do you even read this?" "It's simple," Garrett replied without hesitation. "See, this skull." The golden skull was quite tall, making Garrett stretch a bit. The skull twisted to look at him, then suddenly lifted its own head, holding the skull and offering it to Garrett. Flames flickered in its dark eye sockets. Gazing eerily from within the skull's palm, fixated on him. "Garrett, please, not this way, this makes me feel like Alexander." He tried to compose himself. As long as the skull couldn't change its gender on its own, there's a point to be made. Of course, anatomical features in other worlds might differ, that's a whole other issue. He refrained from reaching out and instead sidestepped, gesturing towards the skull as he spoke confidently. "Look at the frontal bone and the top, it's curved here. In females, the forehead is vertical and the top is flat. Also, the brow ridge, it's pronounced and has several tiny holes. See? In females, the brow ridge isn't pronounced, and there are hardly any holes. Then the nasal root." Content from his forensic medicine course during his third year flowed fluently, without omission. Normally, he would have forgotten it long ago, finished the exam, forgotten. After all, he studied clinical medicine, not forensics, a non-essential subject, not worth keeping in memory, but now he recalled it vividly, every page, every line, the diagrams in the textbook. Garrett even remembered the silly face he drew in the corner of the page. It seems, along with the journey, there might be some unexpected benefits. Just a little bit delighted with the hope of surviving smoothly after crossing. There's a bit more. "Hey, good news always lifts spirits." Garrett, unknowingly, curled his lips. His pace of explaining to the necromancer and the golden skull quickened, his tone growing gentler unconsciously. He adopted the demeanor of a senior physician teaching students in the medical school. With this increased pace, the skull remained expressionless, not that it could express, only the flames within it, previously shimmering, now absolute stillness. It seemed to have completely given up, treating itself as an emotionless display rack. Meanwhile, ripples appeared in the necromancer's eyes, legs trembling, seemingly on the verge of collapsing. "Ah, we're done with the skull. Let's examine the pelvic bone." Garrett poked the skull on its head. Then again, it took the skull a moment to react, hastily readjusting itself. Satisfied, Garrett nodded, then bent to inspect the pelvic bone. "This is the hip bone. The pubic symphysis is this wide, this flat. The angle definitely exceeds 90 degrees. Absolutely female tisk. Let's turn it around and see if there are traces at the back. Aha, this woman has given birth." He bent. The necromancer followed suit. He bent further. The necromancer followed. He twisted his neck to look up after bending. The necromancer straightened, raising his left hand and snapped his fingers. Clatter, clatter. Just a moment ago, the upright golden skull collapsed in a heap right in front of Garrett. Garrett jumped back. Why did this thing collapse? Lost its magic? But then again, it doesn't have joints, ligaments, or muscles on those bones. It should collapse, not stand. He speculated, then saw the metacarpals, radius, vertebrae, ribs, like a slow-motion sequence from an animated demonstration, autonomously assembling vertebrae stacked up, ribs attached front and back, scapulas on the sides, arms and fingers stretching out. Finally, A half-headed skull lay straight on the ground, one hand on the floor, the other groping around, finding its own pelvic bone, shakingly raising it. Garrett, is it because we were too tired from bending and looking, it disassembled itself to show us? But this height isn't enough. He glanced at the necromancer, who looked back after a moment of staring. The necromancer snapped again. The toe bones, tibia, femur of the lower half of the skull began to connect. The lower half stood on the ground, the upper half, headless, extended a hand, grabbed the femur, yanked itself up, then dropped it. A skeletal hand held the pelvic bone. The other hand dug in the ground, finding the skull, and raised it identically. Then the upper half, without the pelvic support, wobbled and fell to the side. Thud. Meow. A loud cat's cry. Garrett turned, seeing the black cat with white boots leaping off the priest's body. Its tail slapped the ground, rolling around, paws in the air. Hey, laughing like this is going too far. You're just a cat. The necromancer couldn't contain it anymore. He tapped his bone staff, restored the golden skull to its original state, then gestured forward, the deepest part of the hall revealing a passage. He twitched his facial muscles, managing a smile. Shall we go in? Garrett happily nodded. The necromancer stepped forward, the black cat swaying its tail, leading the way, the golden skull clattering behind. Just a few steps outside, the necromancer abruptly stopped, coldly shouting, "You lot! None of you think of running." Chapter 22. The temple guards froze in their sneaky movements. The necromancer's bone staff slammed onto the ground. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Dozens of white bone pillars shot up from the hall floor. Temple warriors, Priest Donald, Knight Roman, and a few soldiers from Garrett's squad lay strewn across 5 or 6 separate enclosures, staring at each other from a distance. Garrett blinked. He'd heard of this, but seeing it for the first time, was this the bone cage? He examined closely. Those bones were ghastly pale, each over a meter in length, some even longer. Garrett's interest waned. Not human bones, not intriguing. He wasn't a forensic expert or a paleontologist to identify their exact origin. Better to use this time to plead for his team rather than delve into bone classifications. Garrett attempted to speak, but the necromancer cut in sharply. Don't worry. Not killing them. Just don't want them wreaking havoc. Tomorrow morning, I'll release them. With a gesture and murmured incantations, dark wisps gathered inward in moments. Shattered stone ghouls reformed and began patrolling. Well, with stone ghouls around, it's safer in these enclosures. And sleeping here has its perks, sheltered from wind and rain. Considering the recent mess in the hall, Garrett found no words to argue with the necromancer's decision. His teammates, Priest John and Big Brother Raymond, gestured for silence, feeling assured. Garrett took a couple of steps with the necromancer, then saw Priest Donald leap to the enclosure, yelling, "Wait! Let me heal him. Please, let me heal him. He'll die otherwise." Knight Roman lay unconscious in another bone cage, while 2 soldiers tried to revive him to no avail, only worsening his injuries. Garrett fell silent. Truth be told, seeing Knight Roman in that state gave him a slight sense of satisfaction. As for healing the knight, after that impact, wouldn't he have severe bleeding inside his head or abdomen? Maybe he's gone already? The necromancer glanced at him. Seeing Garrett's lack of reaction or plea, the necromancer's face hardened. No! The priest flinched. The necromancer didn't hold much disdain for him. Pausing for a moment, the necromancer asked, "Got any healing potions?" I do. The priest nodded vigorously, fetching 3 vials of healing potion. Extending his arm through the enclosure, he handed them over. The necromancer inspected them, pointing to one vial. "Pass this over." The black cat agilely leaped, carrying the potion to Knight Roman's enclosure. The soldiers, surprised and relieved, administered the potion. The healing elixir from the priest was far more potent than Little John's basic potion. As soon as it touched the knight's lips, his breathing became heavy. He groaned, opening his eyes. "He's awake, my lord." The soldiers rejoiced. The knight, awakening, spotted the potion and eagerly grabbed it, pouring it onto his wrist. "Don't!" Garrett blurted out. The knight's hand trembled, almost dropping the vial, glaring at Garrett. "What are you doing?" Garrett flinched at the reprimand. He hadn't cared much about the night's situation and had been in a daze, disturbed by the city guard's call. Shouting out was more of an instinctual response than anything. Since he had shouted, he had to face the night's anger, taking it in stride. This wound can't be healed like that. Just external healing won't work, the internal damage needs attention first. Who's listening to your nonsense? The knight snorted, tipping the vial. As the healing potion dripped onto his wrist, the wound healed instantly, leaving his skin flawless, just like before. Only his right thumb still bent slightly. An unnatural posture. Garrett sighed and turned away. The necromancer observed their interaction with interest, smiled, and casually followed with the golden skull. The stone door behind them creaked shut, and with a snap of the necromancer's fingers, the lights brightened. He chuckled at Garrett. "So? Want me to get rid of him for you?" Garrett hesitated. While the offer was tempting, he knew who had called the city guards earlier and understood the appearance of the stone ghoul wasn't without reason. But when it came down to actually eliminating the guy, "No, thank you. Really don't want?" The necromancer raised an eyebrow. His brown hair and blue eyes, along with his thin frame, made him resemble a walking skeleton. That wasn't all. The black cat on his shoulder interjected. "That guy isn't nice to you. When I pounced, he used you as a shield. A cat. A talking cat." Though this was a magical world where skeletons walked and conversed, it was astonishing that a cat could talk. Garrett involuntarily stepped back until his back chilled against the stone door. Truth be told, he had a bit of a fear of cats in his previous life. There were 5 or 6 stray cats in the hospital that nurses often fed, but Garrett never dared to touch them. Now here he was, encountering a combat-savvy talking cat. Garrett braced himself against the stone. The black cat jumped down, landing in front of him. Its tail flicked against the ground, taking a step forward, lifting its head high, baring its teeth. The cat's semi-transparent whiskers twitched due to Garrett's address. Its mood seemed a bit off. "That's so rude. I'm the great Mr. Troca. Don't call me Black Cat." "Black Cat." Oh, a talking, not just talking, a sentient being. Adrenaline surged through Garrett for a moment, but gradually he calmed down. He didn't fear talking cats. He feared lack of intelligence and strong fighting abilities. Silent, agile, and powerful, that's what would really concern him. Well, this was a world with magic and mysticism. Skulls picked up their own heads. Cats talked. What's odd about that? Thanks to countless animations and various games from his past life, Garrett quickly accepted the premise of talking cats. He stepped forward, politely nodding at the black cat. "Hello, esteemed Mr. Troca. I apologize for earlier." "No worries." The cat graciously waved its paw. As it lifted its paw, the pink pads bunched up cutely, making Garrett's fingers itch to pinch them. Sensing this ill intent, the cat agilely leaped away, raising its head, grinning widely. "Seriously, don't want me to get rid of him for you?" "No need." Garrett gradually relaxed. He gazed into the cat's golden eyes, exhaled slowly, and smiled confidently. He's already done for. If he won't mend tendons before healing, who can blame anyone? Chapter 23. Clap, clap, clap. Rhythmic applause filled the room. Garrett turned to see the necromancer, who had leaned his staff aside, smiling and clapping. After a few claps, he extended his hand toward Garrett, appearing more enthusiastic than before. "Thought you were just a good-hearted guy. Never expected you to be a slicer too. Haha. Dear friend, your insights are truly remarkable. Forgot to introduce myself earlier. I'm Andrew Lin, a necromancer from the Black Crow Marsh, and you are? Oh right, what would you like to drink? Mint water or honey water?" Troca found a beehive the other day. I'll tell you, he might have fought off that honey-stealing brown bear. The pace of speech was rapid, topics swiftly transitioning one after another, seemingly in a stream of consciousness, seemingly erratic thoughts. This guy might need a visit to a mental health professional if such a thing existed in this world. Garrett made a mental note, his expression unchanged. He replied with a smile. "I'm Garrett Nordmark, local guy. Can't exactly pinpoint my profession yet. How about some mint water? Anything to eat? Waking up in the middle of the night makes me famished." "Troca!" the necromancer Andrew called out loudly. The golden skull clattered away, while the necromancer finished washing his hands and turned warmly toward Garrett. Hey, so, do you think it'd be easier to control skeleton soldiers if they used their own bones? I think your skeletons are already quite obedient, Garrett replied sincerely. He'd been observing that golden skull. It had been bustling about since it arrived, far from idling like the black cat lying on the table waiting for food. It was fetching things, trays, tea sets, pouring water, and serving food. It even clattered to lift a slab, flames igniting atop it, baking muffins. If it weren't for the fact that it was a skeleton, he'd believe it to be a robot. Obviously. Andrew, the necromancer, wasn't satisfied with that answer. He animatedly described how weak his skeletons were in battle. Garrett, they're stronger than me, eagerly waiting for Garrett's response. I'm not sure, Garrett struggled to force out. This question was just too tricky. You ask me, I'll ask your skeleton? He attempted to squeeze out a smile. I think the skeletons might not know which bone belongs to them. Exactly. Andrew nodded vigorously. These bones should belong to them, but it seems unreliable, so how do we determine which bone is whose? Garrett, should I have declined the invitation? This necromancer, although seemingly harmless, seems a bit off mentally. Glancing around anxiously, Garrett was a bit flustered. How do you distinguish whose bone is whose? He had some methods, like performing DNA tests, test each bone, classify by results, fast, accurate, and cost-effective. But this was another realm. Even if he wanted to, he'd need conditions to conduct such tests. There were less precise methods too. For instance, based on bone fusion times to estimate the owner's age, a bone's growth could indicate the person's age range. For example, one piece of radius bone, the epiphysis had fused between 15 to 17 years old, and the lower end between 16 to 18 years old. Considering both, the owner was likely between 16 to 17 years old. On the other hand, the fusion of a hip bone occurred between 20 to 25 years old, fully fused, indicating the person was at least 20 years old. These two bones definitely belonged to different people. No need to ask, however. Observing bone fusions required x-rays, which didn't exist in this realm. Garrett, formerly an emergency room doctor, wanted to cry once more from the depths of his heart. Who could get me an x-ray machine? If not, get some radium, or I'll rub it myself. Andrew, the necromancer, was still eagerly watching him. Pallid face, greasy hair, clearly didn't prioritize personal hygiene. As for his physique, he resembled a pole needing no wind to sway, a bit thinner, and he'd match his skeletons perfectly. Oh right, the golden skeleton held a tray with a kettle, porcelain plate, glass, and a variety of items like mint water, bread, honey, standing beside the counter, chest out, arms straight, posing rather conventionally but not coming closer. Is this the pace where you get nothing substantial, not even dessert to eat? Garrett silently criticized the necromancer in front of him. In a situation where the circumstances outweighed the people, he could only search his memorino, the forensic textbook stored in his mind, trying to provide something substantial. Actually, we can also identify bone age. For example, in the skull, the teeth are very telling signs. Garrett paused, looking around, attempting to find a skull for practical teaching. Unfortunately, though it was the necromancer's residence, bones weren't scattered everywhere. At least, Garrett scanned around and only found one, the one on the golden skull's head. So, the skull that had been eagerly stared at clattered closer. First, it set the tray down, poured the mint water, arranged the pastry, and then removed its own head, cradling it with both hands, and offered it to Garrett, dark eye sockets tilted upward, two soulful fires within, confronting Garrett's wide-eyed stare. Garrett, what's this? What are you implying? Am I supposed to hold a muffin in one hand, dip it in honey, and eat it while poking at your skull to give a lecture? Even if surgeons generally don't sweat the small stuff, facing the gushing blood, confronting life's harsh realities, they're not this crude. He leaned back, avoiding the skull under his eyelids. Reaching across the table, he grabbed a fork from in front of the necromancer, then firmly tapped the skull. Open up. The golden skeleton's upper and lower jaw obediently parted. Garrett lifted the necromancer's fork, pointing at those black, unevenly worn teeth, explaining each one. The older, the more worn. Look, the tips are worn off, the back molars. Significant wear, exposing the dentin. Tsk, he must have suffered a lot when alive. If only a bit of wear on the crown or no flat tips, it means the person is relatively younger. While he spoke, Andrew, the necromancer, craned his neck, looking at each tooth. He leaned further, body leaning forward, head lowering, almost as if about to dive into the skull's gaping mouth. Halfway through, he suddenly snapped out of it. gesturing randomly at the table. Please have. Garrett wasn't shy either, displaying the dinnertime speed of an emergency room doctor, snatching a muffin with his left hand, pouring honey with his right, sandwiching them together and stuffing it in his mouth. The first bite made his tongue flick the palate, unable to resist a soft click. The muffin was delicately full, honey sweet, and the mint water refreshing. Though the Golden Skeleton's muffin-making skills couldn't match those of a master chef from his past life, it was good enough for late-night hunger. This is what people should be eating. I don't want to eat black bread every day. In a cheerful mood, his lecture became even more comprehensive. Oh, the wear on teeth not only relates to age but also diet habits and economic status. People who eat a lot of black bread will have more worn teeth compared to those eating white bread. Apart from teeth, the pelvis can also be used to estimate age. The pelvis. Chapter 24. A necromancer and a former deputy chief physician of the emergency department found themselves deeply engrossed in discussing bones, as if they had found a long-lost friend. After chatting for half the night, the necromancer Andrew Lin got carried away and, across the table, reached out and grabbed Garrett's wrist. Dear friend, you're perfect to become a necromancer. How about joining us in the Black Marsh? I can introduce you. Oh, I'll request my mentor. He's an 11th level mage. Once he breaks through, he might help you become a lich. Garrett, thank you, but I'm not very keen. I feel like I haven't lived enough yet, but your suggestion as a necromancer does have its appeal. Garrett flipped his wrist and firmly shook the necromancer's hand. I'm more interested in elemental magic. Mr. Lin, you mentioned the Mage Tower and the Council of Magic before. Could you introduce me? Elemental magic. The necromancer exaggeratedly spread his arms. With a grandiose tone and gestures, he proclaimed, everyone loves elemental magic, or at least they'd choose alchemy or summoning, but for the pitiful necromancers, whenever we invite someone, we always hear the same response, respected Mr. Lin, I prefer elemental magic. Respected Mr. Lin, I prefer alchemy, except for those with the deepest sorrow, yearning to resurrect loved ones. No adult chooses the grand necromantic arts. Garrett felt perplexed. The theatrics from a distance were amusing, but up close, it was intense. Dodging the necromancer's spittle, Garrett's mind raced, pondering, is this guy just theatrical? Or is he having a manic episode? I observed his erratic thinking earlier. Are there other signs? Could necromancy affect hormonal secretion and thus influence mental state? But there's nowhere in this realm for an EEG or even standard biochemistry tests. If it's inconvenient. Not at all. With enthusiasm, Mage Lin took a step forward. Before Garrett could evade, he seized his arms, spitting saliva. Though the head of the Mage Tower is a fat, irritable drinker, he and I explored the Hulcia Strait together and fought alongside the iron shells of the Radiant Church. Dear friend, rest assured, with my recommendation he'll surely accept you. The necromancer swiftly unrolled parchment on the desk and scribbled, take it. Thank you so much. A trifle. Lin waved dramatically, then glanced outside, suddenly smiling slyly, leaning closer to Garrett. By the way, that knight's hand, is it beyond repair? Can't fix it. He didn't sew the tendons. Garrett shrugged. Can you fix it? Garrett hesitated, neither nodding nor shaking. While he could handle tendon suturing, it was mainly hand surgery, a meticulous process requiring microscopes. Hours under a microscope left one disoriented. Moreover, this place lacked microscopes or specialized suturing equipment. Even if he treated it, the result wouldn't be optimal. He wasn't proficient at it. He vividly remembered in his past life, he could only suture 4 or 5 mouse tails in a class. Mouse tails had similar blood vessels to human hands, making them ideal for practice. Yet, to the necromancer Lin, Garrett's non-denial seemed like affirmation. The necromancer's eyes lit up. So, how would you treat it? Or should I drag him in and you treat him on the spot? No anesthesia, no sterilization, no hemostasis, straight to surgery? That was too crude and absolutely unacceptable. Garrett opened his mouth, unsure how to respond or where to begin critiquing. However, before he could react, the stone door separating the hall and inner chamber opened again. A black cat leaped in, transforming midair. Garrett glimpsed a flash of black. The cat, called Mr. Troca, started as a normal-sized cat when leaping but landed as a lynx, charging toward the door, almost as large as a leopard. Amidst the beast's low growls, a cacophony of bone-cracking followed. Then came the night. Roman's anguished screams, let me go, let me go. The knight struggled, the sound drawing nearer. Panic erupted in the hall. Donald, the priest's voice particularly loud, release him. Mage, please, release him. Garrett. Garrett froze. In just 2 days in this realm, he'd been pinned down, threatened with a sword at his throat, forcefully conscripted, attacked by monsters, more dangers than in a month or even a year from his past. but never had any moment chilled him to the bone like this. Someone who, a few hours ago, could threaten his life was now being dragged inside by a magical creature merely because a necromancer was curious to witness an uncommon surgery. Man is the master of his fate, the phrase echoed. But in a world like this, who could claim certainty? This isn't right. Garrett's head shook like a windmill. However, the necromancer assumed he had a feud with the knight, unwilling to heal, and attempted persuasion. Just heal him for a look. If you don't want to kill, then heal first and then sever his tendons. Within moments, the transformed black cat already dragged the knight to the stone door. At this critical juncture, the severely injured knight exerted his utmost, clawing at the door's edge. He looked up at Garrett with a mix of resentment and despair. Crack. The knight's fingers snapped against the door's edge. Garrett trembled. No. He turned, stepping forward, standing before the necromancer, gazing directly into his eyes, firm. I won't do something like this. I've sworn never to use healing arts to harm people. Chapter 25. The anticipated smile of the necromancer froze on his face. Glancing at the struggling knight Roman, he shifted his focus back, silently staring at Garrett. Snow-white light surged from the ceiling, casting heavy shadows under his eye sockets and cheekbones, making his thin, skeletal face resemble a skull even more. Garrett's heart skipped a beat. The other was a necromancer, much stronger than him. One of his pets alone could easily overpower Garrett. If he refused the request, would he end up bound and dissected? Tremors raced through Garrett's mind. Despite beads of cold sweat forming on his back, he held the necromancer's gaze without flinching, clenched fists, knees pressed together to keep his legs from trembling. The principles of a healer must be upheld. Indiscriminately cutting into a patient for personal reasons was absolutely unacceptable. Garrett's determination and clear gaze were too firm. The necromancer, Lin, locked eyes with him for a moment, shrugged, and waved a hand. The black cat carried the knight back, tossing him once again into the bone-white prison. The stone door closed. All the curses, gasps, and sighs were shut out. Lin glanced at the stone door and then back at Garrett. But what if he harms you? I'll fight back. Garrett replied firmly. Pausing for a moment, he added, Booty absolutely won't use medical skills to harm anyone. That was the vow he made on the day he started studying medicine in his previous life. Lin fell silent. He looked at Garrett's spirited young face, lost in thought for a moment, then sighed. Once, I had a friend who thought just like you. And then, after I became a necromancer, I avenged him. I'm sorry. Garrett apologized quickly. After a moment's thought, he tried to add, how about this? I'll perform a tendon suture surgery for you to watch. I mean, using an animal, a larger one will do. Ahaha. Lin chuckled. Half an hour later, Garrett was also elated. Tied to the platform in front of him was a live sheep, brought by Mr. Troca from who knows where. Bleeding softly, on a side table lay an array of surgical tools, knives of various sizes, scissors, hooks, and a bow drill. Despite the questionable sharpness of the blades and the daunting thought of sterilization, they were surgical instruments. And he had his hands on a surgical knife again. Happiness one. Can these be used? Lin watched eagerly. Garrett touched each instrument, glanced at the ceiling, and sighed. Something's missing. What's missing, you say? A curved needle, an electric knife. Forget it. Heat up an iron for cauterization. Skip the needle holder. Sigh. Not quite used to this. And get me 2 pairs of fine-nosed pliers if there aren't any. Tweezers will do. Prepare, clean. Garrett held the sheep's leg skin with the forceps in his left hand, gripping the surgical knife's handle between his thumb, middle, ring, and pinky fingers, index finger pressing on the back of the blade, and started to explain in detail. This grip is called the bow technique. Why is it called that? Oh no, are there violins in this world? Garrett's mind raced. Well, even if there aren't violins, there might be morinkuer, and if there's no morinkuer, there might be eru. In any case, various cultures have stringed instruments. Garrett swiftly made a gesture. It's like holding a bow for a string instrument. This grip allows for more force in cutting, usually used for skin and muscle incisions. Is that so? Let me take a closer look. Lin's furry head leaned in. A shadow fell immediately on the sheep's leg under Garrett's knife, obscuring his view. Hey, step back a bit. Sigh, still can't see. Your lighting's not good. Can't you get a shadowless lamp? What? There are lamps without shadows. Garrett had to put down the surgical knife to satisfy Lin's curiosity. After some drawing and tinkering, an hour's worth of effort, the most peculiar shadowless lamp Garrett had ever seen was erected above the operating table. For bone arms crossed at the spine's center, forming across each hand held 2 ribs, creating a circle the size of an embrace between 2 people. Dozens of bone hands hung from this circle, each holding an enchanted glow stick. Garrett, Well, at least the light source meets the requirements, right? And the bone hands holding the glow sticks can be adjusted easily. He performed surgeries joyfully under the shadowless lamp all night, cutting tendons, using forceps to pull them from deep within the muscles, stretching, reshaping, and aiding in healing, continuing dissection, suturing, and finally, slaughtering the poor sheep. The three of them, 2 people and a cat, enjoyed a pot of sheep soup heartily. The next morning, Garrett carried 2 suitcases, reluctantly bid farewell by the necromancer. One case contained used surgical instruments, but the other was much more precious. Each item was placed in compartments lined with red velvet, all made of glass, sparkling in clear beakers, flasks, crucibles, stirrers, balances. It was a set of basic alchemical equipment. There were no herbs or powders in the box, yet this set of alchemical tools alone was of considerable value. Garrett felt uneasy. This is too precious. No, it's nothing, my friend. The necromancer vehemently shook his head. Among mages, there's a saying, no knowledge is without value. Last night, you generously shared so much knowledge with me. Allow me to share something with you. These trinkets, he gestured above the box. Every mage should have a set, every one of them. Dear friend, believe me, once you join our faction, the equipment you'll receive will be much finer than this. Much finer? Are there microscopes? Are there centrifuges? Are there UV spectrophotometers? If not, even a pipette would do. Garrett silently lamented. If they didn't have anything, he might as well figure it out on his own. Joining the faction he was interested in seemed far more important. My sterilization cabinet, my culture dishes, my devices for separating, purifying, analyzing, and synthesizing various medicines, my X-rays, ultrasound machines, MRI. Elemental faction, alchemical faction, I'm counting on you. Garrett immersed himself in hopeful anticipation. Necromancer Lin walked beside him, persistently persuading. He kept eyeing Garrett and the boxes, almost wanting to snatch them back to Black Marsh. Dear friend, are you really not considering joining our faction? Truly. Just nod and I'll immediately take you to meet my mentor. I guarantee you'll enjoy the privileges of a formal mage. You must know, even if you carry my recommendation letter, in the city's mage tower, you'll only start as an apprentice. But I'm really interested in becoming an elemental mage. Chapter 26. Garrett hurried towards the mage tower with his letter of recommendation in hand. The temple's search team returned in disarray, battered and bruised before reaching their destination. They had provoked a powerful necromancer, resulting in their strongest member getting severely injured. Seeing no good coming from pressing forward, they had to retreat to the temple for recovery. As for what would come next, exploration, retaliation, or something else, that was a matter for another time. Even Donald, the priest who had intended to chat a bit more with Garrett, could only regretfully glance his way before boarding a carriage without looking back, swiftly departing with the temple guards withdrawing. They wouldn't concern themselves with the city guards. Garrett and his teammates deliberated briefly before deciding to return to Uncle Edmund's farm and rendezvous with Captain Karen. They borrowed a few mounts from Uncle Edmund, took shortcuts, and made their way straight back to the city. Having suffered such losses, the temple guards might seek retribution. If they were to pin the blame for their failure on the lowest-ranking soldiers, they wouldn't stand a chance. The immediate plan was to rush back and report. Even John, the young priest from the war god's temple, canceled his plans to visit home and turned back towards the temple. As Garrett approached the city, he split from his companions and headed for the mage tower. Heartland City boasted only one mage tower, situated not within the city but atop a hill on its outskirts. The hill was densely wooded, obscuring much of the tower's spire from view. Is this the hidden temple in the mountains? It does have a certain charm to it. Garrett murmured, adjusting the reins. The chestnut mare beneath him snorted and obediently turned, ascending the mountain path. The main road out of the city split into a narrower path leading directly to the mountaintop. This path was wide and well-trodden, evident from the deep wheel ruts, indicating frequent use by carriages. Garrett found the ascent manageable, reaching the mountaintop and arriving in front of the mage tower in less than a quarter of an hour. Despite being called a tower, it was more akin to a castle enclosed within a significant outer wall. Garrett dismounted outside the wall, took a few steps back, and gazed up. This tower is impressively tall. 4 levels. Boom. A tremendous noise startled the birds into flight. The horses whinnied and the sturdy mage tower swayed slightly. Thick smoke billowed from a 4th-floor window, followed by a swooshing sound as someone was propelled in an arc out of it. Garrett. That height. That speed. If they hit the ground and were lucky, they'd break bones. If unlucky, it'd be a snapped neck and it'd be game over. He dashed towards the landing spot. If it was just broken legs, he wouldn't need to assist. If it was a broken neck, there would be no use trying to help. But if it was something like sudden cardiac arrest, airway obstruction, or severe bleeding from fractures, the faster he ran, the higher the chance he could save a life. Run faster. Run even faster. Gasping for breath, Garrett sprinted, almost reaching the speed of rushing a critically ill patient to the operating room. But as he ran, each step slowed more than the last until, supporting himself on his knees, he stood still, panting heavily. It wasn't that he couldn't run anymore. Garrett, after all, was at least a level 1 warrior as a new recruit in the city guard. The issue was that the person ejected from the window made him feel his haste was entirely unnecessary. That person was gesturing wildly, yelling at the top of their lungs, flying in a parabolic trajectory. As they reached the apex, they suddenly produced something from their pocket and tossed it out. Following that, their high-speed trajectory abruptly halted, and they seemed to float down like they had a parachute, slowly descending towards the ground. Garrett held the reins, mouth agape, rooted to the spot. That person drifted leisurely, descending from 3 fathoms to 2, then from 2 to 1. When they looked down and spotted Garrett, they even smiled. Elliot. A roar thundered from above the smoking window. The person hovering in the air shuddered, somehow unable to maintain their flotation, and thudded straight down. Ah. 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 Can you still walk? The soot-covered man, the perpetrator of the Mage Tower's explosion, the person who last landed on a twisted ankle after descending from the sky, finally returned to the Mage Tower riding Garrett's mare with his recommendation. Garrett effortlessly met the master of the Mage Tower, the level 5 mage Gelman Klaus, handing over the letter for the necromancer, Garrett Nordmark. Gelman, the polar opposite of a necromancer, was a hefty man, his crimson mage robes snug around his bulging belly. His deep brown hair was neatly combed back, and a thick beard extended from his ears to his chin, swaying loosely and covering his Adam's apple. Glancing at him, Garrett nearly thought he had time-traveled, witnessing someone right out of a political science textbook. Standing by, Garrett lowered his hand. Mage Gelman briskly read through the letter, then looked up and scanned Garrett from head to toe. Andrew mentioned you wish to learn elemental magic? Yes. How's your foundation? Can you cast spells of any level? Level 1 spells? Level 0 spells? I can't cast any. Have you studied the principles of spells? Basic incantations? Runic constructs? Elementary understanding of elements? Alchemy? You do recognize magical script, don't you? I don't. Garrett's head sank lower. Sure, he knew a few Latin phrases, memorized some medicine names during his medical studies. He even had a minor in German and was fluent in English from reading journals and literature. But magical scripts? Where would he have learned those? Not recognizing magical script meant not being able to understand most, if not all, magical books. Could it be? After studying so hard for years, did I become illiterate after crossing into this other world? Seeing his lack of knowledge, Mage Gelman furrowed his thick eyebrows more and more. Even with a friend's recommendation, he was growing impatient. You do recognize common language, right? I do. Garrett breathed a sigh of relief, quickly replying thanks to the previous owner's father. Even though he had passed away early, he had at least taught the previous owner how to read. There was even a small box of books left at home, and it was with that box that the previous owner completed the most basic reading education. Moreover, I can perform healing spells. Mage Gelman's expression softened slightly, knowing healing spells indicated at least a basic qualification as a caster. Adequate mental and sensory abilities. As for the rest, well, considering the recommendation from his friend Lynn. Since it's Andrew's recommendation, you can attend the tower's lectures first. The fee is 10 gold coins per month, but I'll waive it for Andrew's sake. Thank goodness. Garrett inwardly breathed a sigh of relief, hastily nodding. He didn't have a single silver coin on him right now, let alone a gold one. The city guard's salary seemed to be 5 silver coins per month. Thankfully, it was waived. Otherwise, would he have had to turn back to the necromancer to borrow money? Well, you can come to the Mage Tower every day, read the books in the first level's collection freely, but no copying or taking them out. You can attend my classes, and if my apprentices like Elliot are willing, you can seek guidance from them for copying spells. You'll need your own materials and my permission, and the alchemy lab is off limits without my authorization. Let's discuss the rest once you become an apprentice mage. Chapter 27. How did it go? Garrett had just descended from the mountain when his companions swarmed around him. Eagerly asking, Garrett hung his head, feeling somewhat disheartened. Gelman, the mage, said I should start by observing. He recounted the negotiation process to his friends. Unexpectedly, each of them was thrilled, especially Captain Karen, and the young priest, John Karen, with her extensive experience, was the first to reassure him. This treatment is already quite good, little Garrett. You don't know how many noble children in the city aren't even eligible to observe at the Mage Tower. And it's tuition-free. The young priest valued this aspect even more. He even brought up experiences from his companions to comfort Garrett. Even in our temple, there are many noble descendants and knights who, unable to afford magic education, can only come to the temple for training. Unable to afford magic? Garrett forced a smile. While the tuition for observers was waived, he had to provide his own materials for transcribing spells. Attending Gelman's lectures didn't require extra payment, but whether Gelman's disciples would help him without payment was uncertain. He could tighten his belt and survive on plain black bread, shuttle back and forth between the city and the Mage Tower daily, but could he rely on just his 2 legs? Everything required money. His original salary was only 5 silver coins. After filling his stomach, he could barely afford coarse cloth for clothing. Worried and without showing it, Garrett didn't want Uncle Karen and the others to worry too. Riding along with the team towards the city, he observed the streets inside, growing increasingly concerned. The barracks of the city guards were near the north gate, but they entered through the west gate, passing streets that weren't the busiest, but still quite troubled. Yet, as far as Garrett could see, both sides of the street were lined with dilapidated wooden houses, windows and doors askew, leaking air, patches upon patches adorned women's skirts. Garrett spotted a little girl of 6 or 7 peeking shyly from a doorframe. As soon as she saw him looking, she shrank back, then timidly peeped out again. Her dress was in tatters, barely covering her thighs. And a younger boy was playing half-naked in a corner. At the bakery around the corner, almost all that was displayed were loaves of dark bread. No cobblestones on the streets, no drainage on the sides, no public sanitation facilities. Trash piled up, sewage flowed, and with every horse hoof there was a mud puddle. Muddy splashes of black and yellow dotted the streets incessantly. Garrett didn't want to contemplate what lay within those mud patches. One word: poverty. In such a destitute city, how much could he possibly earn to support himself? Garrett had no idea. He hoped the barracks would be a bit more supportive. No, even if they were, what did it matter to him? Could it lead to a promotion and a raise? Just being able to stay in the Mage Tower every day without being dismissed by the city guard was enough. Full of apprehension, Garrett followed Captain Karen into the barracks. The appearance of the barracks was still somewhat in his memory from the original owner, but upon entering he was slightly shocked. The city guard in Heartland City wasn't that large, only about 200 people. Not even comparable to a county police station from his previous life, of course, whether the population of the small city could even match that of a county in his previous life was also anyone's guess, small as it was, with about 200 people constantly gathering, training, and fighting on this ground. As for how skilled the knights were, Garrett had already seen it with Roman, the knight. In such a small place, they truly didn't have much to do. Like now, on the training ground nearly a size larger than a schoolyard, 2 knights were in a fierce battle, the thunderous clash of weapons audible even from half the training ground away. Captain Karen immediately halted. The captain and Sir Westlow are sparring. Our lieutenant is there too, let's go over. With a total of 200 city guards, there was 1 captain, Stephen Nolan, a 7th level knight, and 4 lieutenants, all with knight level strength, roughly 5th level or above in terms of warrior ranks. Garrett vaguely remembered that his original father was also a lieutenant in the city guard. As for individuals like Uncle Karen who couldn't break through to become a knight, aging and starting to decline in health, they could only remain lieutenants indefinitely. The lieutenant in charge of Karen's team, Lieutenant Flynn, looked to be around 35 or 6, at the peak of his physical prowess. Upon hearing Captain Karen's report, he glanced in the direction of the Spring Goddess's temple and sneered, "They think whatever they say goes? Do they think the city guard is here to be bullied?" Garrett felt a wave of relief. Lieutenant Flynn motioned for him to come closer, smiling as he asked, "You've mastered healing arts? Planning to study magic too? How many times a month?" "Master Gelman allows me to go every day," Garrett replied honestly. After speaking, he hesitated for a moment, looking embarrassed. "Captain Flynn, could I ask you to?" "What?" Captain Flynn asked with interest. Garrett struggled not to blush. It's just, these days I need to study at the Mage Tower and can't join the patrols. Could you not deduct my salary temporarily? Not working for an extended period without pay while expecting to receive wages was something Garrett had never experienced in his previous life. Feeling awkward, he finally managed to get the words out only to hear Captain Flynn burst into laughter. You. Garrett, you. Garrett was puzzled. Captain Flynn burst into hearty laughter, tears streaming down his face as he wiped them away. You're worrying about your salary. You, ha ha. The laughter echoed loudly. Even the two knights fighting on the field momentarily paused, and Sir Westlow, unable to block properly, was sent flying with a thud. Ah! Soldiers watching nearby screamed in shock. A group of them dashed inside, and Garrett had only taken a few steps when he heard someone urgently shout, "Priest! Get the priest quickly!" Urgent and mournful in tone, it sounded just like families shouting doctor in an emergency room in his previous life. Garrett quickened his pace even more. He dashed into the crowd, peering through the gaps, and his breath caught. The injured person was curled up on the ground, lips turning blue, hands desperately reaching toward his chest. His eyes bulged like goldfish, gasping for air as if on the verge of suffocation. The veins on his neck bulged like earthworms drenched in sweat. Struggling hard, this was, take off his clothes. Quickly. Even without him saying anything, the nearby soldiers were already tearing off the man's clothes. For an injured person, the consensus among soldiers was to remove clothing promptly to facilitate the priest's treatment. As the clothes were removed, the wound came into view and Garrett immediately furrowed his brow. The man's chest was unnaturally contorted, ribs were broken, the chest wall collapsed, and jagged bone edges pressed against the skin. What was more dangerous was the abnormal fullness on the right side of the chest cavity. The distance between several ribs was noticeably wider. With each breath, the part of the right chest that had sunken would suddenly collapse or rise, combined with the earlier signs of blue lips, bulging neck veins, and difficulty breathing. Garrett immediately thought of one term, tension pneumothorax. Chapter 28. Tension pneumothorax refers to the rupture of a larger pulmonary air sac or a significant and deep lung laceration or bronchial rupture. The fissure communicates with the pleural cavity, forming a one-way valve, also known as high-pressure pneumothorax. After tension pneumothorax forms during inhalation, the pressure in the pleural cavity decreases, the valve opens, and gas enters the pleural cavity. During exhalation, the pressure in the pleural cavity increases, the valve closes, and gas cannot escape from the pleural cavity. The more one breathes, the higher the pressure inside the pleural cavity, firmly compressing the lungs. Eventually, the lungs collapse entirely, unable to expand. No matter how hard the patient struggles to breathe, they can't get a breath in. This is one of the most life-threatening emergencies, except for slashing the carotid artery or if the aorta in the chest or abdomen ruptures. Other internal bleedings are fatal but not as rapid. Death by suffocation occurs in an instant. Priest. The temple of the war god is indeed adjacent to the military camp. Dashing there and back would take at most 5 minutes, but the patient lying on the ground couldn't wait for 5 minutes. 50 milliliters syringe. Garrett shouted. No response. No one handed him anything. No syringe, no needle, no drainage tube. No one knew what he needed, why he was doing this, or even what the patient's condition implied. This is a different realm, not their hospital. Not the emergency department he'd worked in for over a decade. Garrett looked around. Anxious faces surrounded him, staring at the patient, gazing toward the temple nearby, hoping for the priest to come rushing in. Some even gestured to remove door panels, grab shields, wanting to lift the patient toward the temple. By the time you lift the person, they'll be dead. Garrett panicked. He forcefully stood in front of the patient, one arm outstretched, the other grabbing Sir Flynn. I'm a healer. I can save him. Captain, help me. You can save him? Sir Flynn immediately halted his steps. Garrett nodded vigorously. He's dying. I can save him. I'm missing something, Captain, help me. Sir Flynn hesitated. Garrett had learned healing techniques, something he'd just heard from Captain Karen. No matter how much he trusted Karen, hearsay wasn't the same as witnessing it firsthand. Moreover, the healing techniques of the Temple of the War God, they had been consistent for decades. You look at his face. Turning purple, struggling to breathe. He's dying. I can buy time until the priest arrives. His tone grew more urgent. Sir Flynn halted, staring at the injured person on the ground, then fixed his gaze on Garrett. This youth was speaking the truth. That was the gut feeling Sir Flynn had, but just grasping healing techniques and the mention of a 50-50. What the heck was it effective? Captain, trust him. Karen squeezed through the crowd. Meanwhile, the patient's struggle became increasingly desperate and feeble. Sir Flynn made a snap decision. What do you need? A needle. A thick, hollow needle. Garrett answered without hesitation. It was his mistake earlier. Clearly, no one understood the 50-milliliter syringe in this place. Maybe they didn't even have a concept of milliliters. A needle would suffice, right? A thick, hollow needle. He received blank stares. Garrett didn't lose hope. Then a thin metal pipe. None? Iron? Copper? Any damn hard pipe will do. As thick as a pinky. We have it. Finally, someone reacted, dashed off, and swiftly returned. What they handed Garrett was something he'd used just the day before, a chicken leg bone. Garrett. Have I been stuck with chicken bones these past few days? The key was, the day before was a pleural membrane incision surgery, and with a chicken bone in hand, he could directly puncture it, but today, a chest decompression without a syringe, without a needle. Trying to stick a chicken bone dozens of times thicker than a needle into the chest? Do they think I'm Superman? Garrett roared in his mind, asking for things that didn't exist. This surgery was turning out to be a series of impossible tasks. He hoped the temple's priests would arrive sooner. Otherwise, he wouldn't even be able to contain the infection. Give me a dagger. Quick! Along the right clavicular midline, second intercostal space, Garrett decisively made a stab, stab, stab. It wouldn't penetrate. Are the warriors or knights in this world so physically robust? Who'll help me? Garrett shouted. He measured with his pinky. Just this deep. Stab it. Pull it out, then insert the chicken leg bone. I'll do it. Sir Flynn decisively took the dagger, the knife went in, came out, and the chicken bone followed. A massive pressure released with a hiss, instantly spurting from the bone's center. Success. Garrett relaxed entirely. Kneeling beside the patient, he monitored his breathing, listening intently to the airflow in the chicken bone. His thumb rested on the chicken leg bone's tip, occasionally pressing, occasionally releasing. Post-chest decompression. An external one-way valve device should be applied to facilitate the expulsion of high-pressure gas from the chest cavity while preventing external gas from entering. In emergencies, experienced doctors had used surgical gloves, soft plastic bags, or balloons, cut a small hole and fitted it onto the needle handle, substituting for a valve. Garrett had no surgical gloves, so he used his thumb, managing the situation on the spot with his movements. The bulge on the right side of the patient's chest gradually flattened and his complexion subtly eased. Anyone could tell that this life had been snatched back from the jaws of death. Saved? Saved? It seems like he's really saved. I remember old Shiko died like this, ribs crushed, and he choked to death in no time. The priest hadn't arrived yet. The surrounding soldiers discussed fervently. Sir Flynn's gaze toward Garrett softened and he proactively asked, "Little Garrett, what should we do next?" Next? Insert a drainage tube, perform closed chest drainage, take x-rays, reset the ribs, and if unlucky, open the chest to repair the lungs. But now, asking for things that didn't exist, I can't do any of these tasks. Garrett rolled his eyes internally. Fine. If it were in modern times and the emergency department was overwhelmed, they'd pass it to cardiothoracic surgery, but now, in this otherworldly place, asked the priest? A flurry of footsteps finally echoed. Garrett glanced sideways. The surroundings had already quieted down, everyone saluting, heads bowed. Your Grace. Your Grace. Curious, Garrett turned his head to observe. As for saluting, he was already half kneeling beside the injured. There was no need to repeat the gesture. Surrounded in the center was a robust middle-aged man, broad-shouldered and with a shining bald head. If you ignored the distinct Western features of a high nose and deep-set eyes, with just this bald head, some might believe it was Lu Zhishan. A shield was embroidered on the white robe's chest, not in deep brown but outlined in brilliant silver thread. Above the shield, a war hammer and a scepter intersected in a cross. No other embellishments, just a fist-sized hand holding a scepter embedded with several gemstones, signifying the esteemed status of the archbishop. Around him, 7 or 8 priests, all muscular men, looked more like warriors than clergy. Among them was the young priest John that Garrett knew, the youngest and thinnest, seemingly only fit to be a priest's apprentice. The group surrounded the injured. The bald archbishop glanced at the patient first, then turned to Garrett, eyeing the chicken bone in Garrett's hand. After observing for a moment, he smiled faintly. Child, I'm here now, you and your, he gestured toward the chicken bone. Responsibility can come to an end. Garrett returned the smile. He was respectful and courteous but also composed, firm, without hesitation. Please, proceed with the treatment first. When appropriate, I'll remove it. Chapter 29. Garrett. Captain Karen hissed under her breath. Captain Flynn stepped forward, seemingly aiming to shield Garrett. Around them, the city guards whispered in surprise. Priest John murmured softly, hands covering his mouth. His eyes wide as he glanced between Garrett and the bald-headed bishop. Every freckle on his face seemed etched with worry. The bishop was thoroughly taken aback. He scrutinized Garrett from head to toe, from the coarse linen tunic like everyone else's to the hand wrapped around a chicken bone and the hand clasping the pulse of the injured person. After a moment's contemplation, he asked cautiously, "Child, do you know what you're doing?" "I do." "Do you know the extent of this person's injury and what treatment is needed?" "A severe chest injury, multiple broken ribs in various places, some piercing the lungs," Garrett answered without hesitation. "They need rib realignment, repair, and restoring the damaged lung and pleura. My healing spell isn't strong enough for this. I beg your help." "And adjusting blood pressure, resetting the mediastinum, relocating the lung." "Of course, once the healing spell is cast, the lungs should heal and the mediastinum and lung should adjust themselves. I won't go into that with you. Why are you holding onto this thing?" "To maintain chest cavity pressure balance," Garrett thought, but explaining that might require a dissected diagram and 10 minutes of clarification on what pressure meant. It could lead to a Heidelberg experiment if they didn't understand, which would be quite a hassle. "Come on. Someone needs saving here." Well, it's a bit complicated." Garrett blinked desperately. "How about you heal him first and then I'll explain slowly." "Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere." All right, I'll listen to your explanation later," the bald-headed bishop chuckled. He didn't press further, instead clasping his hands together and murmuring with a smile. This prayer took far longer than Priest John's healing spell. Garrett estimated at least 10 minutes while monitoring the patient's breathing and maintaining pressure on the chicken bone. He thought, "Thank goodness I didn't let go. If you guys had taken over with your healing spell, this person would have suffocated by now." The bishop's healing was indeed extraordinary. When the chanting ended, it wasn't a beam of white light that descended but a gentle milky light rain, oddly soothing. As the light rain fell, the patient's chest swelled, muscles stretched, ribs realigned. As if invisible hands were pulling and adjusting, breathing became smoother, and after a moment, a sudden intake of breath followed by forcefully coughing up bloody phlegm. Garrett hurriedly removed the chicken bone. The light rain dripped gently, and the wound, stabbed just moments ago with a dagger, disappeared in the blink of an eye. Healing spells are truly convenient. Garrett couldn't help but admire. If he had this in his past life, he wouldn't have needed patients to hold an oxygen tube in their mouths or hang drainage bags on themselves, checking every now and then. If something went wrong, he'd have to. 3 to 5 patients like this in a night meant staying up, no chance for rest. The healing spell's effect was immediate. As the bishop ceased, Sir Westlow, previously severely injured, pushed himself up from the ground. Taking 2 deep breaths, savoring the sweetness of the air, he immediately bowed. "Thanks to the great war god." "Thanks to the great war god." The city guards, the war god's priests, all echoed in unison. Garrett reflexively bowed his head, palms together. He was about to join in the prayer when he suddenly remembered his supposed persona, someone guided by the goddess of nature. Thanking the war god didn't seem quite right. He felt like an odd one out. Garrett's mind raced, trying to figure out how to avoid being burned alive. Meanwhile, the bald-headed bishop finished accepting Sir Weslow's gratitude, smiling as he stepped forward, pulling Garrett towards the knight. "In fact, you should thank this young man more. If it weren't for him, by the time we arrived, it might have been too late." Sir Westlow breathed a sigh of relief. He had difficulty breathing before, not unconscious, so he knew what was happening around him. Garrett's shouts, arguments, calling for help, he heard it all. After being stabbed in the chest, the immediate improvement in his breathing was evident, but thanking a new city guard in front of the war god's temple, was it because he didn't want to mix up his own reputation or didn't want the kid to mess up his? Luckily, the bishop intervened. Sir Westlow turned, grabbing Garrett. "I was just about to say that." "Garrett, thank you so much." "It's nothing, it's what I should do." Garrett replied adeptly, calm in tone and demeanor, just like the numerous times in his past life when he saved patients' lives and received thanks from them and their families. Sir Westlow, however, blinked slightly, scrutinizing Garrett, and when he spoke again, his tone had shifted to a more equal one, from address to expression. "Thank you so much, Garrett. Please do visit my home tonight. I must express my gratitude properly." That's really not necessary. I mean, these are things I should do." Garrett tried to decline, but Sir Westlow persisted, repeatedly thanking and inviting him. The bald-headed bishop, observing with a smile, suddenly turned serious and glanced towards Priest John at the rear of the group. "John, is this the young healer you mentioned?" Garrett froze, swiftly looking at John. The freckled youngster vigorously nodded, beaming brightly with a big grin on his face. Then he made a funny face, puckering his lips towards the spring goddess's temple. It warmed Garrett's heart. That wounded knight Roman, returning heavily injured, had clearly left a mark. His body might be damaged, but his connections at home weren't. Who knew if he harbored grudges against Garrett or if he'd seek revenge? Of course, letting Garrett be the instrument. To kill him, to let the necromancer finish him, was something he couldn't bring himself to do. He was, after all, a law-abiding citizen in his past life. So, Captain Karen promptly escorted him back to the barracks to report upwards. It seemed that young John had also reported this incident to the War God's temple. Seeking some form of shelter and protection for himself, Garrett gratefully nodded towards young John. The bald-headed bishop observed their interaction but didn't delve into it immediately. Instead, he extended an invitation. "Hello, young healer. What you did just now was fascinating. We've encountered many warriors we couldn't save in time. Could you explain your method to us in detail?" "Of course," Garrett replied without hesitation. Chapter 30. Since this was a lecture, it couldn't just take place out in the field. Captain Leon raised his hand courteously, inviting the bald-headed bishop, who smiled in agreement, and they made their way towards the council chamber in the military camp. The priests hurriedly followed suit. Garrett fell back a few steps, lingering behind, joining the young priest John. John leaned in immediately, speaking urgently in a hushed tone. "I told the bishop." "About the night?" "Yeah." The young priest nodded quickly. Garrett smiled, patting his shoulder. "Thank you." The council chamber of the city guards wasn't huge but wasn't small either. A long table occupied the center, clearly made from a tree trunk split down the middle, rough-hewn and unpainted. A large map adorned the wall opposite the entrance. And it could seat about 20 people if they squeezed in. The bald-headed bishop and the captain of the city guards entered first. 7 or 8 priests flooded in, quickly filling half the room. Garrett slipped in among the 4 squadron leaders. Naturally, those in the rear, the lower-ranking officers and soldiers, tried to squeeze in as well. The last squadron leader gave a stern look and was about to close the door. "Wait." Sir Flynn intervened. He glanced at Garrett, who was constantly looking back, and couldn't help but smile, waving to Captain Karen. "Karen, come join us too." A minor commotion stirred among the crowd. Soldiers who hadn't received permission jostled, semi-jokingly complaining, "Captain, that's not fair." "Captain, we want to listen too." "Captain, this could save lives." Captain Karen made her way forward amid her comrades' envy. Garrett looked left and right, seeing Raymond and the others far back in the crowd at the hall's entrance, unable to push through. He thought for a moment, then turned to the captain. "Captain, what I'm about to share is beneficial for everyone, helping in times of injury to preserve lives as much as possible. Do you think, perhaps?" He gestured outward. "We could find a larger space?" Of course, that had to be possible. The captain readily agreed, and the bald-headed bishop had no objections either. The group exited the council chamber, heading to the hall. Before they reached it, the tantalizing scent of hot food wafted from the direction of the hall. Garrett's stomach betrayed him with a couple of grumbles. How could he forget? The largest room in the city guard's quarters was the hall, used for ceremonies but serving as a dining room otherwise. The soldiers and priests settled down to listen in the hall, and Garrett confidently took the platform, with no blackboard or chalk. He improvised, gesturing on himself to explain. "Our breathing uses our lungs. When our lungs work, it's like a bellows stoking a fire. Expanding it is inhaling, compressing is exhaling. If the lung gets damaged, sometimes it creates a one-way valve. Air gets in but can't get out during exhalation." He explained as simply as possible how tension pneumothorax occurs and how to manage it during emergencies. Before the bald-headed bishop could pose more questions, he hastened and picked up pace. "On the battlefield, there are many reasons for death, but apart from immediate fatalities, many happen due to severe injuries that weren't promptly treated by a priest. Now, let me talk about how to administer emergency aid for different types of injuries." The spirits of the soldiers lifted. The junior officers and ordinary soldiers were especially excited. The captain and squadron leaders, being noble knights, usually found it easier to receive treatment on the battlefield, but for them, as commoners, it wasn't the same. Sometimes a scratch on a noble's hand was deemed more important than their severed limbs. They could have survived. Some comrades, if given timely treatment, could have survived. Young Garrett is impressive. Beside Captain Karen, a junior officer nudged his arm, whispering, "Like his father?" Another junior officer added, "Yes, the captain back then was just like this, always finding ways to take care of us." A group of middle-aged men murmured quietly, gazing at Garrett with appreciation and nostalgia. Garrett nodded to them, continuing without pause. "There are many reasons for death on the battlefield, but mainly, they fall into 3 categories. First, excessive bleeding. Second, cardiac arrest. Third, inability to breathe. Let's first discuss how to swiftly stop bleeding on the battlefield. The hall buzzed with excitement. Cardiac arrest and inability to breathe were, in the soldier's eyes, mostly classified as fatal injuries or could generally be considered already dead. If such situations arose, most people's first reaction would be to give up, except for bleeding. How many people watched helplessly as their comrades bled out, unable to stop it? The more they tried to staunch the flow, the weaker and more powerless they became, until they closed their eyes forever. Young Garrett was going to talk about how to stop bleeding? Fantastic. Wait. Suddenly, 2 or 3 voices shouted simultaneously. Everyone looked towards a couple of squadron leaders sitting in the second row, 2 of them urgently jumping up. Young Garrett, slow down a bit. We want to jot it down with pen and paper. The hall fell silent for a moment, then erupted into laughter. Even Garrett couldn't help but chuckle. He gestured to Sir Flynn, who had stood up, trying to hold back his laughter. Uncle Flynn, could you get a couple of large papers and a board for me? What I'm about to explain needs some diagrams to be clearer. He drew diagrams with his hands, explaining verbally, occasionally asking someone to come up and demonstrate bandaging techniques. Everyone was engrossed. As dinner time approached, bread and cured meat were brought in from the kitchen, and they paired it with vegetable soup for a meal, continuing the lecture. Just as he finished discussing ways to stop bleeding from the head and arms, a distant commotion arose. It grew louder and closer. Garrett glanced up at the hall's entrance, and simultaneously, several knights stood up, gripping their swords. Who goes there? Captain, captain, captain. Footsteps echoed relentlessly. A city guard soldier rushed in recklessly, propping himself against the door, panting heavily. Captain, the Lord's mansion is here to arrest someone. What's happening? The Lord's mansion is arresting people. Why are they coming for the city guard? The hall erupted into a cacophony of discussion. Over 100 city guard soldiers exchanged whispers, shocked, angry, or bewildered. Someone even blurted out in confusion. Don't we usually do the arrests around here? Huff. Garrett stood steady on the podium at this moment, with the Lord's mansion coming to arrest someone. He could guess roughly why, and indeed the doors burst open. A well-dressed messenger accompanied by 2 guards strode arrogantly into the hall. On the order of the temple, Garrett Nordmark is summoned to answer questions. I hope that helps.